Well, more than 100 Columbia University professors have signed a letter defending students who support Hamas military action in Israel. It reads in part, "We feel compelled to respond to those who label our students anti-Semitic if they express empathy for the lives and dignity of Palestinians and/or if they signed on to a student-written statement that situated the military action begun on October 7th. Now, this comes amid recent campus protests against the war in Gaza, as professors demand Columbia's administration do more to protect student demonstrators.
I've witnessed Columbia students resort to base bigotry. I've seen them parrot foul anti-Semitic tropes. I've seen them label visibly Muslim students as terrorists. I've seen them roar in approval for calls of violence against civilians. I've seen them take to social media nearly every day of the last 3 weeks to call for each other's deaths.
Here now is Ian Samuel, former law clerk of the U.S. Supreme Court. Ian, great to have you. So while some of the rhetoric coming from these students has been alarming, all speech is protected in this country, thank God. However, the sticking point with a lot of folks here is how the professors are framing some of the student speech, referring to Hamas's surprise attack on Israel, slaughtering innocent civilians, as you know, as Hamas's military action and so on. So does this give us unique perspective, maybe eye-opening perspective, into the curriculum at some of these institutions?
Well, I don't think that it's an insight into the curriculum at the institutions, because I think that the same characterization of this, I mean, look, it's a political opinion that's very controversial, especially in the United States, right? To characterize what happened on October 7th as a military action, that is a political opinion, very controversial one. But it's a political opinion that would be shared by like hundreds of thousands of people marching in various cities around the globe that did not receive the benefit, if it benefited be, of an Ivy League education. It is true, of course, that American universities are places where these kinds of sentiments are often concentrated, but it's a big mistake to think of this as like a campus or an academic movement. Primarily, for example, I've met a lot of people who think of this, the actions of October 7th, as a military response to Israeli occupation, like live in Gaza City and haven't attended any universities because there aren't any for them to attend. So I don't think that they're like instructed on this in their freshman international affairs classes.
Oh, you would imagine not. So what do you make then of top donors now vowing to stop giving money to the university amid these pro-Palestinian demonstrations? How do you think that message will be received or interpreted by not only the students, but the staff as well?
You know, it's very interesting because I have listened to howls about illiberalism and anti-free speech movements in this country, about cancel culture, generally coming from the American right, about how there are just certain political opinions that'll get you canceled in this country. And I've always thought those claims were a bit overblown. But here we see in real time, in real life, people expressing political opinions that are quite mainstream, like that are mainstream enough to be expressed in Haaretz newspaper, for example, and by all sorts of people across the globe, mainstream political opinions that are getting young people at the beginning of their careers withdrawn from job offers, that are getting them yelled, real nasty slurs at, like that, I thought very articulate young gentleman at the beginning of the segment, the boy in the red sweater and the kippah. I thought he was, extremely good at explaining that we see in real time actual examples of a political opinion that is forbidden to hold in the United States, even though lots and lots of people do. But there are some very important and very powerful people who are, rich donors to universities who wish to squelch that speech and are doing their damnedest to do so.
So when you think of the people who see this, or maybe the parents who are paying hefty tuition to send their students to this school, and they're horrified by some of this, what do you believe is the appropriate response?
I mean, I don't know what exactly it is that's horrifying them. I mean, if they're horrified by the political opinions that are being expressed at this university, then I suppose I would ask, well, what do you think it is that you're paying for? I mean, universities are supposed to be, I would think, places where political ideas and academic ideas are expressed and debated. The other thing that I would say is, if you're so horrified by some of the political opinions that you're hearing, why don't you just explain why they're wrong rather than threaten to take your money and go home, right? There's a real weakness to the argument that if you even allow these Palestinian demonstrators and these pro-Palestinian demonstrators to speak and articulate their point of view, if they are even allowed to say certain things, that will be so horrible that we have to forbid it ex ante, right? That's a sign of a real weak argument. You can't even withstand and just explain, for example, why it is not appropriate to think of what Hamas did on October 7th as a military action. Well, if it's not, then explain that. Make the argument. And if it's persuasive, then people will hear you, and there should be no problem. But I think because the answers are not persuasive, because a lot of what these demonstrators are saying is persuasive, that is where you get these reactions that the only appropriate thing to tell these people in response is, oh, shut up.
Well, it's a very, very interesting take. I wish we had more time, but certainly appreciate your perspective. Ian Samuel, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you for watching. Go to newsnationnow.com to find News Nation on your television provider. And don't forget to click the red subscribe button below to get more of News Nation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.